Welcome back to Grace to Endure. In this video, we're actually going to look at the mark of God in the Old Testament, particularly in Genesis when God marks Cain. I think this is particularly important when we are studying the mark of the beast from Revelation 13. I think it's important that we get the context of where this idea of marking people and God being the one to do it, where did this come from? So where's the origin of this concept? I think it's important so that we do not fall for the deception of the Antichrist in regards to the mark of the beast. I find it very unlikely that the Antichrist is going to be calling himself the beast or the Antichrist. So he's not going to be calling it the mark of the beast, and he's going to be calling himself God. We know that. So if he's giving out a mark, there's a pretty high chance he's going to be considering it a mark of God, because he's calling himself God, and he's telling people to get marked for his sake and for his worship and possibly his protection. So if he's going to be offering this, I think that that is something that he is actually copying from the Old Testament. So I think it's important that we look into the origin of God marking people in the Old Testament and see what it's about, so we can see what this replica could be about that the Antichrist is going to do. First, just read along with me in Genesis 4:13 through 16, and then we'll go back and take a look at some of the details. Verse 13 says, "But Cain answered the Lord, my punishment is too great to bear, since you are banishing me today from the face of the earth, and I must hide from your presence and become a restless warrior on the earth. Whoever finds me will kill me." Verse 15, "Then the Lord replied to him, in that case, whoever kills Cain will suffer vengeance 7 times over. And he placed a mark on Cain so that whoever found him would not kill him. Then Cain went out from the Lord's presence and lived in the land of Nod, east of Eden." Okay, so let's look at the things that I have underlined. First of all, I want to draw the attention to the fact that there was an area on earth where there was the presence of God, and then there was everywhere else on the earth. Okay, and Cain is actually really upset about the idea of living in the presence of God. So that's something to be noticed. Then we see that he is very afraid of becoming this restless wanderer, but that is his consequence and he has to do it anyway. He's afraid that people are going to kill him. Okay, and so God solves this problem by protecting Cain. He's giving Cain mercy. He does not, notice he doesn't at this time give the death penalty. Later on in Scripture, that command does come, but it's just not at this time. God gives mercy. So God actually uses this mark as an act of mercy on someone who is guilty for sins. And so he puts a mark on Cain so that whoever finds him won't kill him. Now, I find that very interesting because it kind of hints at, although it doesn't completely say it, it hints at the fact that this mark has got to be in visible locations. So if you just find somebody, right, you're not going to see a mark if it's like hidden under their clothing. So I have here in red these little circled areas. They kind of is the general idea of what people do not hide in clothing, especially if it's wintertime and it's getting cold, right? Usually your hands are free and your face and maybe your neck and perhaps the front part of your chest, but most other parts are usually covered, especially if it's cool outside. So this is probably a more likely area where this marking took place, just because it would need to be noticeable to anyone who finds him, so everyone knows, hey, if you find a guy with a mark that's very obvious and distinct, that's a mark of God. Don't kill him or you're going to have vengeance 7 times over, okay? So everyone knows not to kill Cain based on this mark. So it's obviously protection, but it's actually protection for a guilty person. So let's look at the next slide and we'll talk about this a little bit more. Okay, so in this example, we have God marking Cain. In other Old Testament examples we're going to look at, God tells people to mark themselves. And we're going to look in that detail in each of these passages so that we can see why is it that God marks people and that other people are supposed to mark themselves. And when we get some of those details, I think we're going to see that actually the Antichrist tells people to do both. He tells them to allow him to mark them, allow the people that are in charge to mark them. Okay, so it's by choice that they get marked, but he's the one doing the marking or in charge of the marking. So that's important to see that there is a copying going on in these passages that we're going to study. But for right now, let's just look here at God marking Cain. Number one, we looked at that is a visible mark. It's something that everyone is going to be able to see, and it is intended, in fact, for other people to see it so that they will know something. Okay, so it's not hidden. B, we have most likely face or hands so that all who approach will be able to see. And so it is in Revelation 13. Everyone is able to know whose side you are on, who you are with, who you are marked by, who you are giving your allegiance to. Okay, so it's very prominent. Okay, and then let's look at point number 2. It is a mark of protection. God is actually protecting Cain, so that anyone who does anything bad to Cain will themselves have consequences. Okay, and I think it's also important to notice that he is marking a guilty person, and this person is actually receiving mercy in this case. So it may be in Revelation 13 that there could be something like that, some sort of replica of that kind of a promise of protection, and a even protection of the guilty, as long as they will associate with and adhere to, worship, and give allegiance to the antichrist, who is claiming to be God himself. So perhaps a promise of mercy, protection that is visible and well known, so that everyone knows whose side you're on.